This episode of Future Cities Africa is brought to you in partnership with Digital Council Africa. Vino Govender is my guest today on Future Cities Africa. He's Executive for Strategy, Mergers and Acquisitions and Innovation at Dark Fiber Africa. He's dubbed by one of my previous guests as an awesome person. Vino, welcome. Give us a quick tour of your background and some major highlights.
Thanks, Dan, for the intro. Background, I've been here at DFA for the last 5 years, heading up innovation, strategy, and M&A. But spent a lot of time in the industry over the last just over 20 years at all the mobile network operators in the similar role: strategy, product development, go-to-market, innovation. And at the OEMs as well. Spent some time at Nokia Siemens as well as strategist for them. Fairly affair with technology, strategy, how technology gets used, and the regulatory environment shaping how the industry structures itself around these technologies and goes to market in an efficient manner.
On the topic of smarter cities, it seems like the term smart city has been taken out of context over the years. I'd love to know, what is your definition of a smart or smarter city in the African and South African context?
Dan, you're right. I often find that when we talk about smart cities, it just gets associated with technology, sensors, and data, and that kind of stuff. My view is I would consider a city smart is when these investments in not just technology, but in social and human capital are done in an efficient manner and a synergistic manner. And then, so firstly, we invest in the capacity and capability, social, technology, and human. And at the same time, we create an environment that's supported by policy, that's supported by governance, and that's supported by collaboration. And this enables then a city, especially in the African context, to deliver on the sustainable development goals in a sustainable manner. That's how I would view a smart city. It's not just about technology.
So what would be the typical architecture of a smart city and kind of the technological layers that make up a smart city?
Well, we could, a quick reference, if you run through what I would refer you to is the Aussie model, right? So typically, if you break it down from the bottom, you need to have the physical infrastructure out there. So and that's something that we do as DFA in ensuring that we deliver the fiber infrastructure, but that's the what we call the passive infrastructure, and like masts, towers, ducting, aggregation points. So but over and above that, not just that, the supportive infrastructure as well. You need power, you need sustainable power. You need power that's on. You need you have that infrastructure in space. So that's the first layer of the infrastructure. The second thing is that from an infrastructure level is what will make a city smart is that platform layer. And the platform layer is important in that it needs to be open, it needs to be non-proprietary, it needs to have the ability to ingest data in different protocols and make it available in different protocols. The platform also needs to have, so having said that, the platform needs to have the APIs so that innovation can be driven not just by the custodians of the city. You'd find that the skill for developing relevant applications does not necessarily sit within the custodian being the city. It sits with entrepreneurs out there, innovators out there. You'll find in a city the training colleges, the FETs, the universities, you find, or that's where the developer community sits that will develop the relevant applications to run a city. So the physical infrastructure needs to be there. The second thing is that the platforms need to be there in a very open manner, and we drive the open access model, so that meaning that anyone can consume of it, and so that's the important thing. So that needs to be the end, and a very important part of that platform environment is the ability of the city to harness data from multiple points and make that data available to third-party developers so they can develop the necessary applications. A simple example I'll refer to you is, one of the poster childs of smart cities is Barcelona. And what they've done as a city is harnessed a lot of the city data and made that data available out there to the developer community. So that's the second part of you talked about infrastructure. And then I would put in inverted commas, which are also considered as infrastructure, because they're not tangible infrastructure, but the governance part of it, because you need to ensure the data is secure, that you have privacy taken into account, that you have security. The last thing that you want, some cybersecurity, last thing that you want is for someone to, if you're running a smart city, is to get access to key applications, distribute a DDoS attack on it and hold the city at ransom and its citizens. So that governance security type of layer of the inverted commas infrastructure is important as well.
What are some of the key barriers to South African municipalities achieving smart city status? What will stop us from becoming smarter cities?
I think, what would help us to becoming smarter cities, let's rather put it, what would rather help us is a very, very clear, detailed strategy around it. And that's specific to that geographic area as well and citizens, right? You can have a template around it, but it needs to be very, specific to that level. And the reason why I say that is I've often looked at what we call the IDPs. So if you run through it, the integrated development plan is a plan that municipalities and kind of cities put out, stating what the objectives are for the next 3 to 5 years. That's the, so spatial planning and that kind of stuff. But I often find that, it needs to be, it lacks the level of detail. So when I say the level of detail, and I'm going to just paint it a very high helicopter view of it, right? You need to understand here, here's our starting point as a city, right? What do we want to achieve in being smart? What are the different services or applications that we want to deliver that firstly enable us to run more efficiently as a city internally, and also deliver value or enhancing capabilities to our citizens, business, and So if we have a very clear roadmap of that, so that's the first thing. So understanding where you are. So and that means, okay, if I am a city here, what do I want to deliver? So I want to deliver government information services, as an example, on health or whatever. So what are the different applications that need to stack up? If you know what that roadmap is as a starting point, then you can quite then build out what your platform architecture needs to look like. So what platform do I need to have to deliver all these services, right? And which other systems need to come into these platforms? So, do I create the APIs for it? How do I create, and how do I ensure then, that the water department, whether they're doing smart water meters, or the electricity department, or the roads department that are, responsible for road maintenance, alerts on potholes, maybe through an app, or, the issuing of way leaves in a more smarter digital managed way, and, so you have a roadmap of these things, and then you can scale out your platform. So your broader strategy in terms of what you want to achieve informs your platform, I would call it architecture, and then which also then starts informing your network architecture and what type of technologies that we use. So we may decide that, hey, for all our sensors, as an example, for all our smart metering, we might choose, here's a platform that we're going to be using, and it needs to ingest data from an NB-IoT network, or a Sigfox network, or a mesh Wi-Fi network. But you need to find something and decide as a city, okay, what platform and what technology we're going to use, so it becomes scalable. And scalability is important because it reduces the price point to the end user, and also reduces the price point to the city itself. So, and that informs. So that's what I mean by strategy: understanding what your application roadmap being, understanding what your technology roadmap is going to look like, and then understanding then what is my network architecture roadmap is going to look like. And that's important because once you have these things, then we can then move to, okay, we need these things. how then are we going to build it? And that's when you have the basis of saying, okay, what does the city have? What skills, what capacity, capability we have? Do we do it on our own? Do you have the skill to do it on our own, or who do we partner with out there? And that's important as well, because you find a lot of that type of skill and competency is core competency that may sit in private companies. And that's when you can start talking about these public-private partnerships. So what public-private partnerships do we build on the application roadmap, on the platform roadmap, on the network architecture type roadmap? And that's important. And so what does then that achieve? That creates an iterative type of model, right? Because once you have that, then you develop one or two applications and you start ingesting data. And once you get data in, you start using that data, and like I mentioned, exposing the data to the development community, and they create newer applications, some of which may already sit on your first roadmap that you've drafted. But hey, do not underestimate the power of innovation and the smart developers out there and the youth out there, and they will start developing stuff that they feel, hey, I need this, but it doesn't exist. Here's the data, let me fetch it, there's an API to fetch it, develop it, and then ingest it into the platform, and that's how we also drive innovation in a smart city as well.
So on the topic of triple Ps and collaboration, how do you propose we improve public-private sector collaboration? There are some barriers in place. Who needs to take the first step, or what are some of the suggestions that you have?
So I'll go back to my point to saying is, let's get the strategy right and detailed, and maybe some cities are a bit further than others. I think it's important and that we kind of develop that template. What's a detailed template for a smart city strategy? Because we may look at things, like I mentioned, we can talk public-private partnerships, right? But unless you understand what capabilities you have within the city and what capabilities you require that don't exist there, that's the platform or that's the point of discussion to say, okay, where do we need partnerships? So I think that a clear, detailed digital strategy and strategic execution plan is the starting point for discussions around public-private partnerships. And because if you look at, let's look at it, right? What are the big type of inventory items do you want from a public-private partnership? Funding would be one of those things, right? The other things, is it just funding? You'd also require capability, right? Capacity and capability, development capability, data science capability, app development capability, support capability, innovation capability. So where do you get that from? And only once you've done your strategy and understand where the gaps are, you have the starting point to talk public-private partnership. And I must say, I work with a number of cities as well, and let's look at the big metros, right? You've got City of Johannesburg as an example, with many universities and students around here, that can help with it. You've got a lot of the vendors that sit here. It's the same with Durban and Cape Town. Even when you move to smaller towns now, the fact that we're all working online now means that, and the fact that we've got platforms like Azure, Amazon, and AWS in South Africa already, that provides a lot of the software capability in the cloud environment, means that, hey, there may be a smart developer that doesn't even sit in the city. He can be working from anywhere, and they can once again, access the data, access the platforms, through broadband connectivity, and develop smart city solutions. So we've got the building blocks for public-private partnerships. Where do we fit the building blocks in? And that's what I'm alluding to.
Moving on to IoT, you worked a lot on Sigfox with SquidNet. How do you see IoT impacting Africa over the next, say, 5 years?
We've got a number, and I always refer to this because I remember the early days when we kicked off SquidNet, which is the South African license operator of the Sigfox network, in terms of what's the value proposition of it. And you can map a lot of, you can map every one of those capabilities that an IT network such as KuNet brings to achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Let's look at one of the Sustainable Development Goals, such as water, which is an issue not just in South Africa, but in Africa per se, right? And you'll find that, the ability to proactively, to give a voice to a meter and make it a smart meter so that you can proactively, determine do proactive leak detection, make customers aware on the app real time of the water consumption. Because unless, I've seen so many people now that they see what they're consuming, and I'm referring to, prepaid electricity meters, their behavior changes because they become much more conscious. My wife, it's like every day we use so many kilowatts. We used so many kilowatts yesterday, put the pool pump on. When you see it, it changes your behavior. And that's just one example of how, giving a digital voice to something like a meter changes behavior around the scarce resource such as water. And even electricity, okay, it is a scarce resource in the South African context. But if you look at the production chain for electricity, we're burning coal. That carbon gets into the atmosphere. So one of the other sustainability goals where we're talking about air quality, it maps back straight to that. Comes back to, and I'll choose just one more, which is very relevant now, and one of the Sustainable Development Goals was around communicable diseases, specifically malaria, and then, COVID hit us, right? But you find that and IT is not just about sensors, right? It's about harnessing data in real time, analyzing it, making predictive and real time impactful measures in terms of to mitigate risk. And we've seen how, using a track and trace technology from a phone using your location and movement type of issue has enabled us to an extent, manage and curb the risk of infection. So, so IoT, maybe this is a topic for later discussion, if we have a talk around that, is critical in that context, not just from South Africa, but an African perspective. It delivers on our efficacy of meeting our Sustainable Development Goals.
If I gave you a magic wand, what one piece of legislation or one way of thinking or doing would you change in your line of work or your industry?
The one thing I would always want to say up the meter on is on the level of collaboration that we have. We exist in an ecosystem. The ecosystem is made of us as technology partners, network providers, you've got app developers, you've got you've got regulation, you've got government, you've got the private sector, is always to up the level of collaboration, because that enables us to align in a direction that we're going and ensures efficiency in what we deliver. Because time, it's all about time, and at time we never more pressed for time like we are now.
What are your hopes for cities over the next 5 years? Africa and South Africa, what would you like to see?
For me, over the next 5 years, the first thing is for a city to exist, smart cities, one of the key things is you need to have the connectivity around it, right? And the infrastructure. Over the next 5 years, I would assume that, hey, we've solved we've solved most of the foundational data infrastructure requirements. And when I'm talking infrastructure, I'm talking power, utilities, fiber deployment, tower deployment, wireless technology deployment, so that we can get that done. At the same time, we would have had a line template for strategy for cities to kind of plan and execute on. At the same time, we would have implemented platforms, and I'm not talking just about technology platforms, but collaboration platforms that enable us now then to bring on those partners, get the data available, get it exposed, get the wider community, development community, device manufacturers, OEMs in. And at the same time, while we're doing that, which is important, so we talked about infrastructure, but at the same time, in parallel, we have accelerated our investment in social and human capital, right? And that's where, you need upskilling, knowledge transfer, capability building, so that we have the tools, we have the capability to use the tools, and then we can apply these things to iteratively deliver on our smart city journey.